Dear friend, there are moments in life when everything we believe about the natural world gets turned upside down. This story came to me through a park ranger's journal, discovered after his passing in the African plains he loved. What Samuel Walker witnessed and documented challenges our understanding of wild animals and their capacity for memory across generations. Some will say it's impossible, that lions don't remember acts of kindness from decades past, that they don't pass down knowledge of specific humans to their offspring. But after reading Samuel's account, and speaking with those who were there, I believe something extraordinary happened on that remote homestead, something that reminds us how little we truly know about the bonds possible between humans and the wild. This is not a tale of taming nature, but of two species recognizing something ancient in each other, a mutual respect that transcends our modern divisions between predator and prey. The rifle felt wrong in Jake Carson's hands as he stood at the edge of Samuel Walker's property, watching something that shouldn't exist. A full-grown lioness lay beside the old ranger's cabin, her massive head resting on her paws while a man with crippled hands sat 3 feet away, sketching in a notebook. Between them, a cub no bigger than a house cat played with a stick, batting it between mother and human as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "That's not possible," Carson muttered to his companion, Dave Mitchell, who ran the neighboring ranch. "Wild lions don't do that." But she was doing it, had been doing it. According to the truck driver who'd spread the story across 3 counties, the lioness had appeared 8 days ago, dying from a breech birth, and the crazy old ranger had helped deliver her cub instead of calling authorities. Carson had driven 2 hours with proof in his truck, photographs of his dead heifer, killed by a lion 5 days before the lioness supposedly arrived at Walker's door. The timeline made sense. A desperate predator, heavily pregnant, taking easy prey before seeking shelter. "Mr. Carson." The voice belonged to the sketching man, Marcus Thompson, the wildlife photographer from Nairobi. "Before you say anything, come closer. Look at her." "I'm not getting near that thing. She's been here over a week. If she wanted to hurt someone, don't you think she would have—" The lioness lifted her head, amber eyes tracking Carson's movement, not aggressive, just aware, like she was evaluating whether he posed a threat to her cub. Samuel Walker emerged from the cabin, moving with the careful deliberation of age and arthritis. At 72, he looked every year of it, except for his eyes, sharp as the day he'd tracked his first lion 40 years ago. "Jake," Samuel said simply. "Dave." "Sam, what in blazes are you doing? That's a wild lion." "Yes." "She killed my heifer." "No." The certainty in that single word made Carson's prepared speech falter. Samuel walked past him, past the nervous Dave Mitchell, and sat down on an overturned bucket near the lioness. She didn't even lift her head. "Your heifer was killed by a young male," Samuel said, pulling a folder from beside his chair. "Come look at these photos." Carson wanted to refuse, but curiosity won. He approached slowly, Dave following. The lioness watched but didn't move. Samuel spread out photographs on a wooden crate, clear prints in mud, claw marks on hide, the killing bite pattern. "See the spacing between the canines? That's a male's bite radius. And these tracks," he pointed to a photograph, "show no favoring of any leg. The lioness that's here, look at her right rear leg." Carson looked, even lying down. He could see the swelling around her knee joint, the way she kept it slightly extended. "Old injury," Samuel continued. "Probably years old. She couldn't have chased down a healthy heifer. When she arrived here, she could barely walk 20 feet. "Then why did she come here?" Dave asked, speaking for the first time. That's when Marcus stood up, showing them his sketch. It wasn't the lioness he'd been drawing, it was a comparison. 2 photographs side by side, recreated in pencil. One from 20 years ago, pulled from the reserve's archives, another from this week. "Look at the scars," Marcus said quietly. "The ear notches, the unusual eye coloring." Carson studied the drawings, then looked at the living lioness 5 feet away, The resemblance was undeniable. "What are you saying?" Samuel's voice carried the weight of wonder and disbelief. 20 years ago, I freed a young lioness from a poacher's snare, spent 3 days nursing her back to health before releasing her. This lioness. She has the same markings, the same injured leg, healed but still damaged. That's impossible. Lions don't live that long in the wild. Not the same lion, Samuel corrected, but possibly her daughter. Or granddaughter. Dave Mitchell laughed nervously. You're suggesting she knew to come to you. That's fantasy. Sam. The lioness chose that moment to stand, stretching carefully around her injury. She picked up her cub by the scruff and carried it to Samuel, setting it down between his feet. Then she walked to the water trough, drank deeply, and returned to collect her baby. The message was clear. I trust this human with my child. How do you explain that? Marcus asked. Carson had no answer. In his 30 years of ranching on the preserve's edge, he'd never seen anything like this. Lions were killers, threats to livestock and occasionally to people. They weren't. There's more, Samuel said, his voice dropping. Dr. Hayes ran blood tests when she was treating her. The lioness is severely malnourished, has been for weeks. But look at the cub. The tiny lion was plump, healthy, its coat glossy despite being born under traumatic circumstances. She's been starving herself to feed it, Samuel continued. When she came here, she wasn't just seeking help for the birth. She was dying, sacrificing herself for her cub. Animals don't, Carson began. Don't what? Love their young, make sacrifices, choose death over abandoning their offspring. Samuel's eyes blazed with an intensity Carson had never seen. We tell ourselves they're different from us because it makes it easier to kill them, move them, destroy their homes. But what if we're wrong? The lioness returned to her spot, curling around her cub. She looked at each human in turn, Samuel with familiarity, Marcus with acceptance, Dave with mild interest, and Carson. She looked at Carson the longest. She knows, Samuel said quietly. She knows you want her gone, and she's waiting to see what you'll do. Carson felt the weight of that amber gaze in it. He saw not the mindless predator he'd expected, but something far more unsettling. Intelligence, memory, and what looked terrifyingly like hope. The sheriff says I have the right to demand her relocation, Carson said, but his voice lacked conviction. You do? Samuel agreed. Question is, will you? Before Carson could answer, the lioness did something that would haunt him for years. She stood again, walked directly toward him. Carson's hand went to his sidearm. Dave stepped back, but the lioness stopped 3 feet away. Slowly, deliberately, she lay down, exposed her throat, the universal animal sign of submission, of vulnerability, of trust. She's not begging, Samuel said softly. She's choosing to believe you're better than your fear. Carson's hand trembled on his gun. 1 shot. That's all it would take. Protect his cattle. Eliminate the threat. Restore the natural order where wild animals feared humans and stayed away. The cub mewed, a tiny sound that cut through the tension. It tottered toward its mother, stumbling over its own paws, and curled against her exposed belly. Carson removed his hand from the weapon. 1 dead cow, he said roughly. 1, and she's gone. He turned and walked to his truck, Dave following. As he drove away, he looked back once in the mirror. The lioness was still lying there, but her head was up, watching them leave. It wasn't until he was home that Carson realized what bothered him most about the encounter. It wasn't the lioness's unnatural behavior or Samuel's insane trust. It was the sketch Marcus had shown him, the comparison between the lioness from 20 years ago and this one. Because if Samuel was right, if this lioness was descended from one he'd saved decades ago, then it meant something that challenged everything Carson believed about the world. It meant they remembered. It meant they passed down memories of kindness. It meant that every animal he'd killed or driven off his land might have carried stories of humans to their offspring, stories of cruelty or kindness, fear or trust. That night, Carson stood at his window, looking towards the distant lights of Samuel's cabin. Somewhere out there, a wild lioness slept beside a human dwelling, trusting her natural enemy to protect her and her cub. The world suddenly seemed larger and more mysterious than it had that morning. And Jake Carson, who'd killed his first lion at 17 and never lost sleep over it, found himself wondering what stories the lions told their cubs about men like him. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Eleanor Hayes's truck rattled over the last cattle guard before Samuel's property, the morning heat already pressed against the windshield, making the medical supplies in her cooler sweat condensation. 3 days since the birth. 3 days since she'd done something that could end her veterinary license. She parked beside Marcus's Land Rover. The photographer sat cross-legged in the dirt, 20 feet from where the lioness lay nursing, his pencil scratched across paper, not photographing, just drawing. "Where's Sam?" Eleanor asked. Marcus nodded toward the cabin. Through the open door, she could see Samuel at his table, struggling to open a pill bottle, his fingers bent at wrong angles against the child-proof cap. The lioness lifted her head, watching Eleanor approach with the medical bag. The cub detached from nursing. Milk, drunk, and drowsy. Eleanor knelt at what she'd learned was the safe distance, close enough to help, far enough to respect. The lioness's breathing was better today, steadier. The IV site from yesterday showed no infection. "Need to check your leg," Eleanor said, knowing the words meant nothing to the lion but everything to herself. Talking made this feel medical, professional, not insane. She reached for the swollen joint, the lioness tensed. A shadow fell across them. Samuel stood there, pill bottle still unopened in his twisted hands. He lowered himself beside Eleanor, joints popping like dry twigs. The lioness relaxed. Eleanor probed the injury. Heat radiated from the swelling, but less than yesterday. The antibiotics were working. She prepared another injection, drawing the medicine into the syringe. "She won't let you," Samuel said. "She did yesterday. I was touching her yesterday." Eleanor looked at him. His face showed the exhaustion of 3 nights sleeping on the porch, watching over their patient. "Then touch her," Eleanor said. Samuel placed his gnarled hand on the lioness's shoulder. The massive cat turned her head, sniffed his wrist, her tongue, rough as sandpaper, licked once across his knuckles. Eleanor slid the needle home. The lioness didn't flinch. "How?" Eleanor whispered. Samuel kept his hand steady on the golden fur. "Same way you trust me to hold a scared dog while you stitch it up. She understands cooperation." The cub crawled toward them, dragging its rear legs. Eleanor's chest tightened. The cub— "Back legs don't work right," Samuel said quietly. "Since birth." Eleanor scooped up the tiny creature. It weighed nothing, ribs prominent under soft fur. The mother watched but didn't intervene. The cub's spine felt wrong under Eleanor's fingers, misaligned. The breech birth had damaged something crucial. The cub's spine curved wrong beneath Eleanor's fingers, a subtle S where there should be a straight line. She pressed gently along each vertebra. The tiny creature didn't cry out, couldn't feel her touch below the mid-back. "Paralysis," she said. Samuel's hand stilled on the mother's fur. The lioness turned her massive head, looking at her cub in Eleanor's hands. Her pupils dilated, contracted, dilated again. "Can you fix it?" Marcus asked from his position by the Land Rover. Eleanor set the cub back beside its mother. The little male dragged himself forward with his front paws, back legs trailing useless behind him. He found a nipple, began nursing. "No." The word hung in the morning heat. Flies buzzed around the water trough. The lioness began cleaning her cub with long, methodical strokes of her tongue, paying special attention to the lifeless legs as if she could lick feeling back into them. Samuel's knuckles went white where he gripped his knee. In the wild. He'd die within days of weaning. Eleanor packed her supplies. Can't hunt, can't run, can't follow the pride. Marcus set down his sketchbook, walked closer, The lioness watched him but didn't tense. 3 days of proximity had built something, not trust exactly, but acceptance. "What about here?" Marcus asked. "Here." Eleanor looked around the dusty yard, the ramshackle cabin, the old man who could barely open his own medicine bottles. "You want Sam to raise a paralyzed lion cub? The mother's doing fine here. She's wild. She'll leave once she's healed." The lioness stretched, careful of her injured leg. She picked up the cub by his scruff, carried him to the shade beneath Samuel's porch, set him down in the cool dirt. Then she walked to the cabin door, looked inside at Samuel's kitchen, and returned to her cub. Marcus retrieved his camera for the first time in days, photographed the tracks she'd left. She's memorizing the space, learning where things are. That doesn't mean. A vehicle rumbled up the access road. Not a truck, smaller, faster. Eleanor recognized the white Toyota before she saw the driver. Tom Mitchell, head ranger, the reserve's authority on whether this situation could continue. Tom parked, stayed in the vehicle for a full minute, observing. The lioness with her cub, Samuel still sitting in the dirt, Eleanor with medical supplies, Marcus with his camera. He finally stepped out, uniform crisp despite the heat. His hand rested on his tranquilizer gun, not drawn, just there. Dr. Hayes. Mr. Thompson. He nodded to each. Sam. Samuel didn't respond, didn't move from his position near the lioness. "Got a call from Jake Carson," Tom continued, "and another from the transport company, and 3 from headquarters." He pulled out a notebook. "Seems you've got yourself a situation." The lioness rose to her feet, slow, deliberate. She stepped over her cub, positioning herself between the uniformed man and her baby. Tom's hand tightened on the tranquilizer gun. "Don't," Samuel said, first word he'd spoken to Tom Mitchell in 2 years, since their argument at his retirement party. "She's displaying aggressive behavior. She's being a mother." Tom took 3 photographs with his phone. "Documentation. The review board will need to see evidence." "And of what?" Eleanor stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "An injured animal receiving medical care. That's what I do. On the reserve, with oversight. Not in some old man's yard." Samuel finally stood. The effort took him 2 tries, hand braced on his knee. "My land. My choice. Your land borders the reserve. What affects you affects us." Tom gestured at the lioness. "What happens when she hunts, when she brings down prey in view of the tourist roads, when she teaches her cub that humans mean food and safety?" The cub chose that moment to drag himself into view, pulling his body forward with tiny, determined paws. His back legs left parallel grooves in the dust. Tom's expression shifted. "What's wrong with it?" "Birth injury," Eleanor said. "Paralyzed." The ranger's face went through several changes. Surprise, calculation, something that might have been pity. "Then it's already dead," he said. "Better to put it down now." The lioness moved so fast Eleanor didn't see it happen. One moment she was standing over her cub. The next she was 3 feet from Tom, lips pulled back, showing teeth designed to crush bone. Tom's hand went to his gun. Samuel stepped between them, just walked into the space between the gun and the lioness, slow as molasses, like he was crossing his kitchen for coffee. "Move, Sam. No. I will tranquilize you both. Try it." The 2 men stared at each other. 40 years of history between them. Tom, the young ranger Samuel had trained. Tom, who'd taken over when Samuel's hands got too bad to hold a rifle steady. Tom, who'd suggested the retirement party Samuel had walked out of. "Why?" Tom asked. "Why this lion? Why now?" Samuel turned to look at the lioness. She'd backed away when he intervened. Now stood panting in the heat, her cub trying to nurse from his position on the ground. 20 years ago, Samuel said, I saved a lioness from a snare. 3 days later, Helen died. Cancer took her while I was playing savior to an animal. His voice stayed flat, factual. I've wondered every day since if that lioness lived, if she had cubs, if saving her mattered at all. He pointed at the mother, then at the cub. "Now I know." Tom lowered his phone. "You think this is the same?" "Her daughter, maybe granddaughter. Look at the scars. Tom, look at the eye color." Tom studied the Lioness. His training kicked in, the cataloging of marks, the assessment of age, the comparison to mental files of known lines in the area. "The one from Sector 7, he said slowly. "The female with the damaged leg. She disappeared 6 months ago." "Pregnant," Samuel said, "looking for somewhere safe to give birth." "And she came here 60 miles from her territory." Marcus spoke up from his position by the vehicle. "I've been researching. Lions have been documented traveling hundreds of miles to return to birth sites. If her mother or grandmother denned near here while recovering from Sam's help, that's speculation." "No," Eleanor said, surprising herself. "That's observation. The same thing we use to track migration patterns, hunting behaviors, mating rituals. Why is it so hard to believe they also track kindness?" Tom holstered his tranquilizer gun, pulled out his notebook again, wrote for a solid minute while everyone waited. 48 hours, he finally said. "I can give you 48 hours before I have to file a report. The Lioness needs to be stable enough to relocate by then." "Relocate where?" Samuel asked. "Away from human settlement." "She chose human settlement." "That's the problem." Tom walked back to his vehicle, stopped at the door. "Sam, I respect what you did for the reserve. 30 years of service means something. But this," he gestured at the scene, "the Lioness, the paralyzed cub, the old man who could barely stand. This ends badly, for you or for them." He drove away, dust cloud hanging in the still air. The Lioness returned to her cub, began nursing him. Samuel lowered himself back to the ground, hand reaching out to rest near, not on, just near, her massive paw. Eleanor saw it then, the thing that Tom had missed, the Lioness's paw, twice the size of Samuel's arthritic hand, moved slightly, just enough for one claw to touch his smallest finger. Marcus raised his camera, then lowered it without taking the shot. Some things weren't meant to be captured. Eleanor's phone buzzed. Text from Tom. "Board wants a full veterinary assessment. Official documentation on whether relocation is viable." She looked at the paralyzed cub, the exhausted mother, the old man whose body was failing as surely as the cub's. 48 hours to figure out what viable meant. 48 hours to decide who got to live free and who didn't. The sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound that made her blood chill, the low, repetitive whoop of hyenas. They'd smelled the blood from the birth, the weakness of injury. They were coming. The hyenas' calls rolled closer across the grassland. Not the manic giggling of movies, the low, rhythmic whoop that meant hunting party. Organization, intent. Samuel counted. 4 distinct voices, maybe 5. The Lioness heard them too. Her ears swiveled. Tracking sound. She stopped nursing. Nose lifted to test the wind. Marcus lowered his camera. "How far?" "Half mile," Samuel said. "Maybe less." Eleanor's hands fumbled with her medical bag. "We should get inside." "She won't come inside." Samuel watched the Lioness pick up her cub, carry him to the deepest shadow under the porch. She set him down, stood over him, waiting. The whooping stopped. Silence was worse. Silence meant stalking. Samuel's rifle leaned against the cabin wall, hadn't been fired in 2 years. His hands couldn't hold it steady anymore. Marcus had nothing. Eleanor had a dart gun with ketamine. Useless unless the hyenas got close enough to touch. The Lioness growled. Low, almost below human hearing. A vibration more than sound. Her tail lashed once against the porch boards. Movement in the tall grass beyond the water trough. A flash of spotted hide, another to the left. They were spreading out, circling. "They know she's injured," Eleanor whispered. The Lioness stepped forward, away from her cub, put herself between the approaching pack and the porch. Her bad leg trembled with the weight but held. A hyena materialized from the grass, Massive female, jaw muscles bulging beneath spotted fur. She didn't charge, didn't need to. Time was on her side. She lowered her head, that eerie grin displaying bone-crushing teeth. 3 more emerged, flanking positions, patient. Samuel stood. His knee popped, loud as a branch breaking. The lead hyena's eyes shifted to him. Old prey, easy prey, then back to the lioness. Decisions, calculations. Marcus moved to Samuel's left, Eleanor to his right. 3 humans and 1 injured lion against a pack that could crack elephant bones. The lioness took another step forward. Her paralyzed cub mewed behind her, dragging himself deeper under the porch. The sound triggered something in the hyenas. Ears perked. The injured baby, easier target than the mother. The lead hyena rushed, not at the lioness, around her, straight for the porch. The lioness pivoted on her good leg, caught the hyena mid-leap. They rolled in the dust, snarling, snapping, fur and blood. Impossible to tell whose. The other hyenas circled, looking for openings. Samuel grabbed his rifle. His finger found the trigger, but his hands shook too badly to aim. The combatants separated. The hyena limped back, gashes across her shoulder. The lioness stood, but her bad leg buckled. She went down on one knee. The pack sensed it. Closed in. Marcus grabbed the water bucket, hurled it at the nearest hyena. The animal dodged, laughed that horrible laughing bark. Eleanor fired her dart gun, missed by 3 feet. The lioness tried to stand. Couldn't. The lead hyena approached, cautious but confident now. A truck engine roared up the access road. Tom Mitchell's white Toyota slid to a stop in a cloud of dust. He leaped out, rifle already positioned. The shot cracked across the morning air. Dirt exploded between the lead hyena and the lioness. Warning shot. The hyenas scattered but didn't flee. They regrouped 20 yards out, watching. Tom chambered another round. Everyone inside, now. The lioness, Samuel started, will follow her cub. Marcus, grab the cub. Careful of the spine. Marcus scooped up the paralyzed baby. It weighed nothing. Fur soft as cotton. The mother's eyes tracked him, but she was too exhausted to protest. Inside, Tom repeated. Move. They backed toward the cabin door. The lioness dragged herself after them, blood seeping from new wounds. The hyenas paced at the edge of the yard, waiting. Tom fired again, over their heads. They retreated another 10 yards, but no further. Inside the cabin felt impossibly small with 5 bodies, 4 human, 1 lion. The lioness collapsed just inside the door. Her cub pressed against her belly. Blood pooled on Samuel's floor, soaking into wood he'd laid with his own hands 30 years ago. Tom slammed the door, leaned against it. They'll wait. Hours, if they have to. She needs treatment, Eleanor said, kneeling beside the lioness. These wounds. Later, when they're gone. What? Samuel looked through his window. The hyenas had settled in the shade of his truck, eyes fixed on the cabin. Why did you come back? Samuel asked Tom. Tom checked his rifle, counted remaining rounds, saw the dust cloud from their movement, recognized hunting pattern. He paused. And because 40 years ago, you drove off a leopard that had me cornered. Figured I owed you one. The lioness lifted her head, looked at each human in turn. Her eyes held something Samuel had seen before in wounded animals. Not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. Understanding that sometimes survival required accepting help from strange quarters. Marcus still held the cub. It mewed weakly, seeking its mother. He set it down gently beside her. She sniffed it, began cleaning its face despite her own pain. The paralysis, Tom said quietly, watching. I didn't know. Changes things, Samuel asked. It changes everything. A healthy cub. We relocate them both. But this. He gestured at the tiny lion dragging himself to nurse. He'll die in the wild. Dies here, too, Eleanor said. Without surgery, I can't perform. Equipment I don't have. There's Kruger, Marcus said suddenly. The veterinary center at Kruger. They do experimental surgeries. Have a whole ward for disabled animals. That's 400 miles, Tom said. I have contacts there, from my documentary work. Eleanor was already pulling out her phone. Dr. Henny Pocketer, best wildlife surgeon in South Africa, if anyone could help. The mother won't survive that trip, Tom said. Not wounded like this. Samuel watched the lioness breathing. Shallow. Rapid. Shock setting in. Then we heal her first. Sam, the board gave me 48 hours to assess if relocation is viable. Samuel met Tom's eyes. Is it with her wounds, the cub's condition? Tom looked out the window. The hyenas hadn't moved, waiting with predator patience. No, he admitted. Current condition. Relocation would be a death sentence. Then we have 48 hours to change the condition. Eleanor was already pulling supplies from her bag. I need surgical equipment, antibiotics, IV fluids. I can get those, Tom said. But Sam, even if we save them both, then what? You can't keep a lion. The lioness made a sound then, soft, almost like a purr. Her rough tongue licked Samuel's hand where it rested near her head. She kept me, Samuel said. That night she arrived, dying. She could have gone anywhere. She came here. Marcus had his phone out, scrolling through contacts. Dr. Pocketer says he can assess the cub if we can send video, high resolution, multiple angles. The hyenas. Tom checked his ammunition again. I've got 12 rounds, enough to drive them off, but they'll come back after dark. Unless, Eleanor said, looking up from the lioness's wounds, we give them a reason not to. Everyone looked at her. Hyenas are scavengers primarily. They're here because they smell blood, weakness, but they're also smart. They won't risk injury for uncertain prey. Meaning, we make this territory too dangerous to be worth it. Samuel understood first. Fire. They hate fire. More than that, Eleanor's mind was racing now. The problem-solving that made her the reserve's best vet. Noise, light, chaos. We make this place a sensory nightmare for them. Tom nodded slowly. Could work, but someone needs to go for supplies. I'll go, Marcus said. They'll attack your vehicle when you try to leave. Not if we give them something else to think about. Tom smiled then. The first time Samuel had seen it in years. Remember that time we drove off the poachers at Marula Dam? Samuel remembered. Flashbangs, smoke grenades, every trick in the Ranger handbook. I've got flares in the truck, Tom said. Emergency kit. The lioness tried to sit up, managed to raise her head, her eyes fixed on the door. She could smell them out there, waiting for her baby. Samuel put his hand on her massive head. We're not going to let them have him. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she rested her head against his leg. 200 pounds of predator choosing to trust the weakest creature in the room. Outside. The lead hyena stood, stretched, and walked closer to the cabin. Testing. Probing. Time was running out. The sun would set in 8 hours. After dark, everything changed. Hyenas owned the night. Marcus held up his phone. Dr. Pocketer wants to video call. Says if we can stabilize them both for 72 hours, he'll drive up personally. From Kruger. He says, Marcus paused. Reading. He says he's never seen a case of a wild lioness accepting human help like this. It's worth documenting, worth saving. Another hyena joined the first, then another. 6 now, visible. Tom stood. We do this now, or we lose our chance. He looked at Samuel. Your call, old man. Samuel looked at the lioness, at her broken cub, at the humans who'd gathered in his cabin to help creatures that should be their natural enemies. His father would have shot the lioness the moment she appeared. His grandfather would have mounted her head on a wall. But Samuel had learned something in 72 years that they never had. Sometimes the greatest strength was admitting you needed help. Eleanor, stop the bleeding. Tom, get those flares. Marcus, tell your doctor we'll have his patient ready. The lioness closed her eyes, sides rising and falling with each labored breath, but her tail curled protective around her cub, and her body stayed positioned between him and the door. She'd chosen her allies. Now they had to prove worthy of that choice. Tom opened the door a crack, studied the hyena positions. "Sam," he said quietly, "you know what happens if this goes wrong, if she turns on us, if the board finds out I helped instead of tranquilizing her." Samuel thought of Helen, dead 20 years. Of all the choices he'd made that led to this moment, an old man with ruined hands, a paralyzed cub, and a dying lioness making their stand against the world. "Some things," he said, "are worth the risk." Tom nodded, pumped his rifle. On 3. Outside, the hyenas began to whoop again, calling reinforcements. How many more would come before dark? Tom Mitchell kicked the door wide. The flare gun bucked in his hand, phosphorus trail arcing over the hyenas. Red smoke bloomed where it landed, acrid and thick. The pack scattered, not far, 20 yards, then they turned, watching through the smoke. Marcus sprinted for his Land Rover. Keys fumbled, dropped, retrieved. Engine turning over. The lead hyena charged his vehicle. Tom's rifle cracked. Dirt exploded at the animal's feet. It veered off. Marcus's tires spun, caught. Vehicle lurching toward the access road. 2 hyenas gave chase but stopped at the property line. Territory dynamics even they respected. Tom backed into the cabin, door slamming behind him. "He's clear." Eleanor already had her hands inside the lioness's wounds. Deep punctures along the shoulder. Tissue visible through torn hide. The lioness's eyes stayed open but unfocused. Her breathing came in short huffs that moved her whole body. "Samuel, I need light. All of it." Samuel dragged his lamp from the bedroom, then the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. His hands shook, trying to hold them steady. Tom took the flashlight, aimed it where Eleanor pointed. Blood welled between Eleanor's fingers. Nicked an artery, not severed, but... She pressed harder. The flow slowed, but didn't stop. The cub crawled to his mother's head, mewing. The sound seemed to focus the lioness. Her eyes sharpened, found her baby. She tried to lift her head. "Keep her still," Eleanor said. Samuel lowered himself to the floor, bones protesting. He placed his palm flat on the lioness's neck. Just pressure. Contact. Her pulse hammered against his hand. Too fast. Too weak. There. Eleanor found the bleeder. "Tom, in my bag. The small curved clamps." Tom found them. Passed them over. Metal clicked against teeth as Eleanor worked. The blood flow stopped. Temporary fix, without proper surgery. She didn't finish. Samuel felt the lioness's pulse skip. Stutter. Skip again. Her eyes started to roll back. "No." He moved his face close to hers. "Your cub needs you." Her pupil found his, dilated so wide the amber almost disappeared. Eleanor pulled suture from her kit. "This is going to hurt her." The first pierce of needle through hide made the lioness jerk. Samuel pressed his forehead against hers, the way he'd seen lions greet each other. Her hot breath washed over his face, meat and blood and wild, stitch after stitch. The lioness trembled but didn't fight. Her massive paw flexed, claws extending and retracting with each pierce of the needle. "Almost done," Eleanor said. Tom's phone rang. Marcus's voice through the speaker. "At the supply store, they want to know what antibiotics." Elchelan rattled off names. Dosages. "And IV bags, many as they have. They're asking questions. Tell them it's for me," Tom said. "Official reserve business." Outside. The hyenas had returned to their watching positions. One sprawled in the shade of Samuel's truck, patient as death. Eleanor tied off the last suture. The lioness's side looked like a map of violence, dark thread holding together what wanted to tear apart. "Now, the infection risk." Eleanor prepared an injection. "This might buy us time." The medicine went in. The lioness didn't react. Her breathing had gone shallow, eyes half closed. The cub pulled himself along his mother's body, found a nipple, tried to nurse. Nothing came. The trauma had stopped her milk. "Formula," Eleanor said. "Marcus needs to get the kitten formula. For a lion." Close enough. Better than starvation. Tom made the call. Samuel stayed on the floor, hand on the lioness's neck. Her pulse felt thready, irregular. She's going into shock, Eleanor said. We need those IV fluids now. 40 minutes, Tom said. Minimum. They might not have 40 minutes. Samuel could feel her slipping, that subtle loosening that preceded death. He'd felt it in too many animals over the years. The cub gave up trying to nurse, curled against his mother's cooling body. His tiny ribs showed with each breath. Eleanor dug through her bag, came up with a small syringe of clear fluid. Dextrose. Might help. She injected it directly into the cub's thigh muscle. He mewed in protest but didn't have strength for more. Tom stood at the window, rifle ready. 2 more hyenas just showed up. 8 now. Maybe more hidden in the grass. Samuel's knees screamed from kneeling, but he didn't move. The lioness needed the contact, the anchor to keep her from drifting. Her eye found his again. In it, he saw not the fierce predator but something else. A mother watching her baby die, knowing she couldn't help. Hey, Samuel said softly. Remember 20 years ago, your mother, or grandmother? I pulled wire from her leg right here. This very spot. The lioness blinked slowly. She lived, had cubs, had you. His throat tightened. You'll live too, both of you. Wind rattled the windows. Samuel smelled rain coming, that metallic tang that preceded storms. Weather's turning, Tom said. Good and bad. Rain might drive off the hyenas, but would make Marcus's return treacherous. The dirt road turned to mud soup in heavy rain. Eleanor checked the lioness's gums. Pale, almost white. She's lost too much blood. Transfusion. From what we'd need another lion. The cub stopped moving. Eleanor grabbed him, felt for a pulse, found it, barely. He's crashing. She started chest compressions with 2 fingers, gentle but firm. The tiny body flopped with each push. The lioness saw. A sound came from her throat, not a roar, not a growl, a keen, the sound of grief that crossed all species barriers. Eleanor breathed into the cub's nose and mouth, compressed again. Breathed. Come on, little one. Nothing. Samuel watched the lioness watching her cub. Her eyes went somewhere far away, that giving up he'd seen in dying animals who'd lost their reason to fight. Eleanor. Samuel said quietly, No, not yet. More compressions. Another breath. The cub gasped. Tiny chest expanded. Another breath on his own. Another. Eleanor set him against his mother. He was breathing, but barely conscious. The lioness sniffed him, tried to lick him. Her tongue barely moved. Marcus's Land Rover roared up the road. Tom opened the door, rifle covering him. Marcus ran with boxes, bags hanging from both arms, inside. Eleanor worked with desperate efficiency. IV bag hung from a nail, needle sliding into the lioness's leg vein, fluids running wide open. Antibiotics. She injected 3 different syringes, anti-inflammatory, vitamin K for clotting. The formula came next. Eleanor mixed it in Samuel's coffee mug, drew it into a syringe. The cub was too weak to suck. She dribbled milk into his mouth. Most ran out, but some went down. Storm's here, Tom announced. The first drops hit the tin roof like bullets, then the deluge. Water sheeted off the eaves, turning the yard into instant mud. The hyenas retreated to better shelter but didn't leave. Samuel could see their eyes glowing in the shadows under his truck. The lioness's breathing steadied slightly. Color returned to her gums, faint pink instead of white. It's working, Eleanor said. The cub managed to swallow more formula. His eyes opened fully for the first time, pale blue and unfocused. Marcus knelt beside Samuel. The store owner called someone. There were men asking questions when I left. What kind of men? The kind that carry rifles and have opinions about problem animals. Tom cursed. Carson's friends, the hunting club. They'd kill the lioness, claim self-defense, take the cub for a trophy, or let him die. Either way, problem solved in their minds. How long before they come? Samuel asked. Tonight. Maybe sooner. The lioness lifted her head slightly, looking at each human in turn. The IV had helped, but she was still too weak to stand, much less fight. "We move them," Tom said. "Get them to the reserve." "She won't survive the trip," Eleanor said. "She won't survive Carson's friends either." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the yard in stark white. In that instant, Samuel saw them. Not 8 hyenas, 12, and behind them, just visible at the edge of his property, the lights of vehicles, 3 sets of headlights, turning off the main road. They were coming. The lioness saw them too. She pulled her cub closer with one paw, eyes fixed on the approaching lights. Marcus grabbed his camera, started filming. Evidence, in case. "Put it away," Tom said. "Get the flares. All of them." Eleanor kept working on the cub, forcing more formula down. "He needs at least another hour of fluids. We don't have an hour." The vehicles stopped just outside Samuel's gate. Doors slammed. Voices carried through the rain, angry, determined. The lioness tried to stand, made it halfway before collapsing. The IV line pulled taut, held. Samuel looked at the paralyzed cub, the failing mother. His friends ready to fight a battle they couldn't win. Outside, predators and humans converged on his small cabin. Tom checked his ammunition. 4 rounds left. "Sam," he said quietly, "we can't protect them from both threats." The voices grew louder. Carson's voice rose above the others. "I know they're in there. Saw Mitchell's vehicle." The hyenas sensed opportunity in chaos. They crept closer, using the storm as cover. Eleanor looked at Samuel. "What do we do?" Samuel touched the lioness's head. She pressed against his palm, trusting him to have an answer. He didn't. Lightning flashed again. In the brief illumination, Samuel saw Carson and 5 other men at his gate. One carried a rifle, another had a catchpole, the kind used for rabid animals. Behind them, the hyenas spread into attack formation. The lioness made that keening sound again, calling for help that wouldn't come unless... Samuel stood, joints screaming, walked to his door, put his hand on the handle. "Sam, don't." He opened the door, stepped into the storm. The rain hit like ice pellets. Carson and his men stood 20 yards away. The hyenas circled in the darkness beyond. "Evening. Jake," Samuel called out. Carson stepped forward. "Get out of the way. Sam, we're here for the lion." "Which one?" "Don't play games." Samuel spread his arms wide, rain streaming down his face. "I'm serious." "Which lion? The mother dying on my floor, the paralyzed cub who'll never hunt, or maybe the 12 hyenas about to tear us all apart?" Carson's men looked around nervously, eyes catching the gleam of watching hyenas. "You're lying." A hyena laughed in the darkness. Then another. The sound rolled around them, everywhere and nowhere. Carson raised his rifle. Samuel smiled. "Go ahead. Jake, fire that weapon. Let every predator for miles know exactly where we are." Thunder crashed overhead, drowning out Carson's response. When it faded, a new sound filled the air. The lioness, inside the cabin, had begun to roar. Not the weak attempt from before, something deeper, primal. A call that carried despite walls and storm. And from the darkness, impossibly, an answer came. Another roar, male, close, very close. Carson's men bunched together, rifles swinging toward the sound. The hyenas had gone silent. Samuel stood in the rain, waiting to see which predator would strike first. The male lion emerged from the darkness between 2 vehicles, massive, black-maned. Water streamed off his body as he walked, not rushed, not cautious, deliberate. Carson's rifle swung toward him. "Nobody move." The lion stopped 15 feet from the men. His eyes, green gold in the vehicle lights, fixed on the cabin behind Samuel. He inhaled deeply, chest expanding. From inside, the lioness roared again, weaker but unmistakable. The male's tail lashed once. Muscle rippled under his soaked hide as he took another step forward. "Shoot it!" one of Carson's men hissed. "Wait!" Carson's voice cracked. "There might be more." The hyenas had vanished into deeper shadows. Even predators knew when they were outmatched. Samuel felt rain running down his spine, pooling in his boots. The male lion's attention shifted to him. Recognition impossible. But the lion didn't advance. Tom appeared in the doorway behind Samuel, rifle raised. "Nobody do anything stupid." "Tell that to him," Carson said, nodding at the lion. The male sat, just lowered his haunches to the mud and sat, like a house cat in the rain. His eyes never left the cabin. "He's here for her," Samuel said. "Lions don't," Carson started. The male roared. The sound hit like a physical force. Samuel felt it in his chest, his bones. Carson's men stumbled backward. One slipped in the mud, went down hard. Inside the cabin, the lioness answered, weaker but clear. Marcus pushed past Tom, camera in hand. "Everyone needs to see this. Get back inside," Tom ordered. Marcus ignored him. Stepping into the rain, the camera's light illuminated the scene. 6 armed men. 1 old ranger, and a male lion sitting in the mud like he was waiting for permission to enter. "This is evidence," Marcus announced, camera panning across faces. Jake Carson and 5 others, trespassing on private property, threatening an injured animal and the people protecting her. "Turn that off," Carson snarled. Marcus kept filming. "The world should know what happens here." The male lion stood, took 3 steps toward the cabin, stopped when Tom's rifle tracked him. "He wants to see her," Samuel said. "You're insane," Carson said. "Maybe." But Samuel walked backward toward his door, keeping his eyes on the lion. "Tom, lower the rifle." "Sam, trust me." The rifle came down inch by inch. The lion watched, waited, then followed Samuel, 10 feet between them, then 8, then 6. Carson raised his weapon. "It's, stalking him." The lion turned his massive head toward Carson, lips pulled back, showing canines designed to puncture skulls. Carson's finger found the trigger. Marcus stepped between the gun and the lion. "Move, boy." "No." "I will shoot through you." "Then do it." Marcus held his camera steady. Still recording. "Shoot an unarmed man protecting an animal. See how that plays in court." Lightning split the sky. In that white instant, Samuel saw everything. The fear in Carson's eyes, the calculation in the lion's, the determination in Marcus's face. Thunder followed immediately, so loud it hurt. The male lion used the sound as cover. 3 quick strides brought him to the cabin door. Tom scrambled aside. The lion looked inside, saw the lioness on the floor. A sound came from his throat, not a roar or growl, almost a question. The lioness lifted her head. Their eyes met. The male entered Samuel's cabin, just walked in like he belonged there. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall. The lion ignored her, focused entirely on the female. He sniffed her wounds, the IV line, the paralyzed cub. His massive head swung toward the humans inside, Tom with his rifle, Eleanor with medical supplies, Samuel standing in the doorway. The male sat beside the lioness, positioned between her and the door, protective, clear. "Nobody move," Tom whispered. Outside, Carson and his men argued, voices rising over the rain. "We're leaving," one said. "This is insane. We came here to solve a problem," Carson insisted. "The problem just got bigger. That male could kill us all. So could the hyenas," another added. "Where'd they go?" The men looked around nervously. The darkness seemed alive now, full of unseen threats. Marcus backed toward the cabin, camera still running. "You should go, Mr. Carson. Before something happens we'll all regret." "This isn't over," Carson said. But he was already backing toward his truck. The male lion watched through the doorway as the men retreated to their vehicles. Engines started. Headlights swung away. The sound faded down the road. Inside the cabin, nobody moved. The male lion turned his attention back to the lioness. He licked her face with surprising gentleness. She responded weakly, her tongue touching his muzzle. "They know each other," Eleanor breathed. The male noticed the cub then. The tiny creature tried to crawl, but his back legs dragged uselessly. The male sniffed him, then looked at the humans. The question in his eyes was clear. "Birth injury," Samuel said, knowing the words meant nothing to the lion but needing to explain. "Paralyzed." The male lion did something unexpected then. He lay down beside the cub. Massive body curved protective around the tiny form. The cub instinctively pressed against the warmth. Eleanor found her voice. "The male. He's not the father. Wrong age. Wrong territory." "Then why?" Tom asked. Samuel knew. "Same reason we're here. Sometimes you help because it's needed." The storm intensified. Wind howled through gaps in the walls. The tin roof drummed under the assault, but inside, a strange peace settled. 2 lions and 4 humans, sharing space that should have been impossible. The lioness's breathing grew labored again. The IV bag was nearly empty. "I need to change it," Eleanor said. "But he—" The male watched her approach. Eleanor moved slowly, showing the new IV bag. She reached for the line. The male didn't move. She changed the bag, adjusted the flow rate. "Thank you," she whispered to the lion. Marcus had stopped filming. Set the camera aside. "We can't keep them here. Carson will be back with authorities." "The reserve," Tom suggested. "She's too weak, and with the cub's condition—" The male lion stood suddenly, muscles tensing. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Everyone froze. Through the rain, Samuel heard engines, multiple vehicles, coming fast. Tom looked out the window. Not Carson, official reserve vehicles, 3 of them. "I didn't call them," Tom said. The vehicles stopped outside. Doors opened. Samuel recognized the lead figure, Director Harrison, Tom's boss, the man who could end all of this with a word. Harrison stood in the rain, taking in the scene through the open door. 2 lions in a cabin, humans providing medical care, the whole impossible situation. "Mr. Mitchell," Harrison called, "would you step out here, please?" Tom looked at Samuel, then walked into the storm. Samuel could see them talking but couldn't hear over the rain. The male lion watched, body positioned to defend if needed. The lioness tried to lift her head, gave up. The cub had found warmth against the male's belly and fallen asleep. Tom returned, water streaming off his uniform. His face was unreadable. "Well?" Eleanor asked. "Dr. Potgieter called Harrison, the veterinary surgeon from Kruger. He's driving through the night. We'll be here by dawn. Harrison wants to see if this is real, a wild lioness accepting human medical help, documented on video. And if it is, then maybe we rewrite some rules about human-wildlife interaction." The male lion had been listening to the voices, watching faces. He seemed to make a decision. He stood, walked to the door, looked back at the lioness once, then disappeared into the storm. "Where's he going?" Marcus asked. Samuel knew. "Hunting. She needs food to produce milk. He's going to provide." They waited. 5 minutes. 10. The reserve vehicles remained outside. Harrison refusing to leave his post. A thud on the porch. The male lion reappeared, dragging a young warthog. Fresh kill, clean and quick He pulled it inside, laid it beside the lioness. She was too weak to eat, but she understood the gesture. Her tongue touched his face again. Harrison appeared in the doorway, rain-soaked and wide-eyed. Did he just— "He's feeding her," Samuel said simply. Harrison pulled out his phone, started making calls. Samuel heard fragments. Unprecedented. Behavioral study. Possible sanctuary status. The male lion settled again beside the cub, but his eyes stayed alert, watching these humans who'd entered their story. Eleanor checked the lioness's pulse, still weak but steady. "She needs surgery. Real surgery." 6 hours, Tom said. "Potgieter will be here in 6 hours." 6 hours. Samuel looked at the lioness, fighting for each breath. At the paralyzed cub who might never walk. At the male lion who'd appeared from nowhere to help. Lightning flashed again, and in the brief illumination, Samuel saw them clearly. The hyenas. They'd returned, forming a wide circle around the cabin and vehicles, waiting. The male lion saw them too. His growl was different this time, deeper, a promise. Harrison backed away from the door. "How many?" Tom counted shadows between lightning strikes. 15, maybe 20. The lioness heard. Her eyes found Samuel's, and in them he saw the truth. She wouldn't last 6 hours, not with blood loss, shock, and stress, unless they found a way to save her now. Eleanor was already moving, pulling supplies from her bag. "There's one thing we haven't tried." She held up a vial. Adrenaline. "It could kill her faster." Tom said, "She's dying anyway." The male lion watched Eleanor approach with the syringe. He didn't move, didn't threaten, as if he understood this was their last chance. Eleanor looked at Samuel. "Your call." Samuel thought of all the animals he'd lost over 40 years, all the times he'd been too late, too slow, too careful. Not this time. "Do it." The needle went in. The adrenaline hit the lioness's system like lightning. Her whole body convulsed. Eyes rolled back, showing white. The male lion snarled, lips pulling back from his teeth. "Hold her head," Eleanor commanded. Samuel dropped to his knees, caught her massive skull as it thrashed. Foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. Her heart hammered visible through her ribs, too fast, irregular. "Is this normal?" Tom asked. Eleanor didn't answer. Her fingers pressed against the lioness's throat, counting pulse. Her face went pale. The lioness's body went rigid. Breathing stopped. "No, no, no." Eleanor started chest compressions, throwing her whole weight behind each push. The male lion rose, a growl building in his throat, not at the humans, at the lioness. He nudged her with his massive head. Again. Harder. Nothing. The cub sensed something wrong. He mewed, dragging himself toward his mother's still form. The male blocked him with one paw, gentle but firm. "Samuel, breathe for her," Eleanor ordered. Samuel looked at the lioness's open mouth, the teeth that could crush bone. He leaned down, sealed his lips over her nostrils, and exhaled. Her chest rose. He pulled back, watched it fall again. Her whiskers tickled his cheek. Her breath smelled of blood and meat. "Keep going," Eleanor said. Harrison appeared in the doorway. "What's happening?" "Get out," Tom snapped. More compressions, more breaths. Samuel's vision started to gray at the edges from hyperventilation. The male lion did something unexpected. He bit the lioness, not hard, just closed his jaws on the loose skin at her neck and pulled. The way a mother carries cubs, the way lions wake each other. The lioness gasped. Her chest heaved. Once. Twice. Rhythm returning. Eleanor grabbed her stethoscope. Heart rates stabilizing, but the lioness's eyes opened, unfocused. Her paw twitched, claws extending and retracting without purpose. "Neurological damage?" Tom asked. "Maybe." The adrenaline, combined with blood loss. The lioness tried to lift her head. Couldn't. Her tongue lolled out, dry and pale. She looked at the cub, made a weak sound in her throat. Eleanor prepared more formula, but when she brought it to the cub, he wouldn't take it. He wanted his mother's milk, nothing else. Outside, the hyenas had grown bolder. One darted past the vehicles, testing response time. Harrison's men shouted, waved flashlights. The hyena retreated, but not far. The male lion stood at the door, watching them, calculating. Marcus moved to document the lioness's condition, then stopped. His hand went to his side. When he pulled it away, blood covered his palm. "Marcus!" Samuel saw the torn shirt, the deep gashes beneath. From earlier, when the hyena charged, I thought it missed. Eleanor turned from the lioness. "Let me see." Marcus lifted his shirt. 3 parallel cuts ran from his ribs to his hip, deep, bleeding steadily. "Those need sutures. Hospital sutures. After the lioness is stable. Marcus, infection from a hyena bite." I said after. But his legs betrayed him. He sat down hard, back against the wall. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. Tom was already on the phone. "We need medical evacuation. Human injury." No helicopter will fly in this storm. Harrison called from outside. The Lioness saw Marcus bleeding. She made that keening sound again, the one that meant distress. She tried to crawl toward him. The IV line pulled tight, needle tearing from her leg. Blood welled immediately. "Stop her," Eleanor said. But the Lioness was beyond stopping. Maternal instinct fired by the smell of injury. She dragged herself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood from the torn IV site. The male lion moved between her and Marcus, gentle but firm. She collapsed against him, spent. Eleanor worked on Marcus now, packing the wounds. "These are hours old. Why didn't you say anything?" The Lioness needed help more. Samuel saw the truth in Marcus's eyes, the fever starting, the infection taking hold. Hyena mouths carried bacteria that could kill within days. "He needs a hospital," Eleanor said. "Now." Tom grabbed his keys. "I'll drive him." In this storm, the roads will be washed out. Then we wait for it to break. Marcus's head lolled. The Lioness. "Who'll document?" "I will," Samuel said. But, even as he said it, he watched the Lioness declining. Without the IV, without continuous fluids, she was fading. The adrenaline had bought time, but at a cost. Her nervous system was firing randomly. Leg twitches, facial spasms. The cub crawled to her, found a nipple, tried to nurse. Still no milk. He was weakening too. The formula not enough to sustain him. Eleanor tried to restart the IV, but the Lioness's veins had collapsed. Too much blood loss, too much shock. "We're losing them both," she said quietly. The male lion seemed to understand. He lay down beside the Lioness, began grooming her with long strokes of his tongue. Comfort care. The thing lions did for dying Pride members. Outside, Harrison was arguing with someone on the phone. Samuel caught fragments. Liability. Protocols. Media disaster. Marcus tried to stand, made it halfway before his legs gave out. Tom caught him before they hit the floor. "That's it. We're going." Tom hauled Marcus toward the door. The hyenas saw opportunity. 3 rushed forward as Tom dragged Marcus to his vehicle. Harrison's men fired warning shots. The hyenas scattered but regrouped immediately. "They know we're weakening," Harrison said. Inside. The Lioness's breathing went shallow. The cub mewed continuously now, sensing something wrong. The male lion looked at Samuel, and in those green-gold eyes was a question. Samuel knew what he was asking. The same thing Samuel had asked himself with dying animals over 40 years. How much suffering was too much? Eleanor prepared another syringe. Morphine. For comfort. Not to save, to ease the passing. Samuel's throat closed. After everything, the miraculous arrival, the trust given, the male's appearance, they were going to lose her anyway. Tom's vehicle engine roared. Through the rain. Samuel saw him forcing through the mud. Marcus slumped in the passenger seat. The hyenas gave chase briefly, then returned to their vigil. The Lioness's paw flexed, reaching for her cub. She couldn't lift it enough to touch him. Samuel moved the paralyzed cub against his mother's chest. The tiny creature pressed into her warmth, still searching for milk that wouldn't come. Eleanor held the morphine syringe, waiting for Samuel's permission to end the fight. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the brief silence that followed, Samuel heard it. Vehicles. Lots of them. Coming fast, despite the storm. Harrison looked down the road. What now? Through the rain, Samuel saw headlights. 5, 6, 7 vehicles, a convoy. The lead vehicle skidded to a stop. The door opened. Dr. Henny Potgetter stepped out. 4 hours early. He took one look at the scene. The dying lioness, the paralyzed cub, the protective male, the circling hyenas. "Where's my patient?" he asked. But even as Eleanor pointed to the lioness, Samuel saw the truth in Potgitter's eyes. He might be too late. Dr. Potgitter dropped his medical cases in the mud. Water streamed off his glasses as he counted the supplies his team unloaded. Surgical equipment, blood bags, an entire mobile veterinary unit they assembled under a tarp canopy. "Get her outside," he ordered. I need room to work. She won't survive being moved, Eleanor said. She won't survive in there either. Podgitter was already pulling on surgical gloves. The male, will he attack? The male lion stood between them and the lioness, muscles coiled. Samuel approached him slowly. Their eyes met. Samuel pointed to the lioness, then to the door. The lion held his gaze for 3 heartbeats, then stepped aside. Harrison, get your men. We need a stretcher. They used a tarp. 6 men lifting together. The lioness didn't respond. Too far gone to protest. The male followed every step, growling when anyone moved too quickly. Under the canopy, Podgitter's team worked with practiced efficiency. IV lines in both forelegs, blood pressure cuff modified for her leg, oxygen mask jury-rigged from human equipment. She's got maybe 20 minutes, Podgitter said. Type her blood. We need a donor. The male, Eleanor suggested. If he's compatible. Samuel watched Podgitter draw blood from the barely conscious lioness. The male lion allowed them to draw his blood too, standing rigid while the needle went in, never taking his eyes off the female. The field lab tech worked fast. Same type. We can transfuse. Then do it. They ran a line from the male to the female, his blood flowing into her dying body. He lay down beside her, as if understanding he was her lifeline now. Eleanor, talk to me about the cub, Podgitter said while preparing surgical tools. Paralyzed, birth trauma. T12 through L2 affected. Podgitter glanced at the tiny creature. One problem at a time. Sam, isn't it? Hold her head. Samuel cradled the lioness's massive skull while Podgitter worked. The surgeon's hands moved with 40 years of precision, finding bleeders Eleanor had missed, repairing internal damage. There, Podgitter breathed. The uterine artery was partially severed. She's been bleeding internally for days. Harrison stood at the edge of the canopy, phone pressed to his ear. He hung up, approached Samuel. The DNA results came back. What DNA results? From the blood sample Eleanor sent 3 days ago. The lab rushed it when they heard about this situation. Harrison showed Samuel his phone screen. This lioness, she's not just any lion. She's the daughter of L 2019-7. Samuel's chest tightened. L 2019-7 was the official designation for the lioness he'd saved 20 years ago. The one he'd named Legacy in his mind. That's impossible. Legacy's territory was 200 miles from here. The GPS collar data shows otherwise. Harrison scrolled through files. After you released her, she came back to this area 17 times over 6 years. Always briefly, always to this specific region. Wanon, Gay looked up from assisting Podgitter. She was checking on Samuel. Or establishing this as safe territory for her offspring, Harrison said. We found 3 different den sites within 5 miles of this cabin. The revelation hit Samuel like cold water. Legacy had been here. Multiple times, maybe watching him while he sat on his porch, obvious to her presence. There's more, Harrison continued. Your wife's medical records were donated to the university research program. A student found something. He pulled up another file. Photos from her last conscious days. Samuel's hands shook as he took the phone. Helen. Thin from cancer, but smiling. Sitting in a wheelchair outside the hospital, and beside her, barely visible in the background, a young lioness with a distinctive scar on her ear. Legacy. The timestamp is 3 hours before she passed, Harrison said softly. The lioness was photographed near the hospital grounds. Security reported it, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. Samuel's vision blurred. Helen had seen Legacy. In her final hours, the lioness had been there. Look at the last photo, Harrison said. Helen's journal, photographed by the research student. Her shaking handwriting, Sam's lioness, came today. Sat outside my window. The nurses were terrified, but I knew why she was here. Checking on him through me. I told her he'd need watching after I'm gone. Silly. Talking to a lion. But she looked at me like she understood. Like she was making a promise. If you're reading this, Sam, know that we're all connected. Human and wild. The lioness you saved will pay it forward. Maybe not her, but her children. Or their children. Love doesn't recognize species. Only souls. Samuel couldn't breathe. The lioness under his hands, Legacy's daughter, had come here carrying genetic memory, trained behavior, or something deeper. Potgitter's voice cut through his thoughts. I need more blood. The male's given all he can safely. The male lion was wobbling on his feet, weak from blood loss, but he wouldn't leave the female's side. What about the hyenas? Eleanor asked. Wrong species, but in emergency. No good. We need another lion. They had no other lion. The lioness's heart rate dropped. The monitors Potgitter had attached beeped warnings. She's crashing again. Samuel thought of all the blood already on his floor, in his yard, wasted. If they'd known sooner, could have collected it. Wait. Eleanor grabbed Samuel's arm. The warthog, the one the male killed. It's fresh. The blood's still liquid. Animal blood for transfusion. That's insane. Not transfusion. Volume replacement. Plasma expanders. We did it once with a leopard using antelope blood, just to maintain pressure while the body makes new cells. Potgitter looked at the dying lioness, at the weak male, at the paralyzed cub. Get it? They drained what they could from the warthog carcass, filtered it through field equipment, and pumped it into the lioness. Her blood pressure stabilized. Barely. It's buying time, Potgitter said. But she needs real blood. Her own blood reproduced. How long? 12 hours for her body to replace what she's lost. If she survives that long... Samuel watched the monitors. The lioness's heart beat steadily but weakly. The male lion had collapsed beside her, exhausted from his donation. Harrison's phone rang. He answered, face going pale. Tom's at the hospital with Marcus. The hyena wounds were worse than thought. Sepsis setting in. They're rushing him to surgery. Samuel thought of Marcus, who'd overcome his fear to help, who'd stood between Carson's gun and the lion's. The cub, Potgitter said suddenly, he's going into respiratory distress. The tiny creature's breathing had gone rapid, shallow. His little chest heaved with effort. Pneumonia. Common in paralyzed animals. Eleanor was already preparing antibiotics. But with his size, the dose. Too much would kill him. Too little would be useless. Samuel made a decision. Call Tom. Tell him to bring Marcus's camera, all of it. Why? Because if these lions are going to die, the world needs to see how hard they fought to live. But even as he said it, Samuel heard something that made his blood freeze. The hyenas had gone silent. In 40 years of living here, Samuel had learned one truth: hyenas only went quiet before they attacked. He looked around. Potgitter focused on surgery. Eleanor treating the cub, the male lion too weak to fight, the female dying despite everything, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the canopy, dozens of eyes watched and waited. Harrison, Samuel said quietly, get your men ready. For what? Before Samuel could answer, the first hyena charged. The hyena hit Harrison's man from the blind side. Teeth found shoulder, tore through uniform. The man's scream cut through rain as he went down. 3 more hyenas burst from the darkness. Harrison's rifle cracked. One spun away yelping. Another latched onto medical equipment, dragging expensive machines into mud. The male lion tried to stand, made it halfway before his legs buckled. Too much blood given. He crawled toward the fight, dragging himself like his paralyzed cub. Samuel grabbed the only weapon in reach, Potgitter's surgical scalpel. The blade felt tiny in his arthritic grip. A hyena darted under the canopy, jaws snapping at the lioness's exposed flank. Samuel slashed. The blade caught ear and scalp. Blood sprayed across surgical equipment. The hyena retreated, shaking its head. Keep them off her, Potgitter shouted, hands still inside the lioness's open abdomen. 2 more minutes. Eleanor shielded the cub with her body. A hyena grabbed her medical bag, shook it like prey. Supplies scattered across mud. Harrison's men formed a line, firing into the air. The shots echoed across the plains. The hyenas pulled back, but not far. They knew wounded prey when they saw it. The male lion reached the lioness. He positioned himself over her open surgical site, teeth bared. Any hyena wanting her would go through him first, even if he died trying. Movement at the road, Tom's vehicle skidding through mud, emergency lights flashing. He leaped out, Marcus's camera cases in hand, but also something else, a megaphone from the reserve. He triggered the siren. The electronic wail split the night, painful at close range. Hyenas hated unnatural sounds. 3 fled immediately, but the matriarch held position. The massive female who'd started this, blood running from wounds the lioness had given her days ago. She wanted revenge, and noise wouldn't stop her. She charged straight at the surgical table. The male lion met her head-on. They collided in an explosion of mud and fury. The male had weight but no strength left. The hyena had desperation and numbers. 2 more joined her, tearing at the lion's flanks. Samuel dropped the scalpel, grabbed the oxygen tank meant for the lioness, swung it like a club. The metal connected with hyena's skull, the crack audible over storm. The matriarch released the male, turned on Samuel. Her eyes held intelligence, calculation. She recognized him as the weak one. Easy target. Samuel's hands couldn't grip the tank for another swing. The lioness's eyes opened. Still on the surgical table, abdomen held together with clamps. She turned her head toward the threat. The sound that came from her throat wasn't loud. She had no strength for volume. But it carried something primal, a mother's rage. The hyena matriarch froze, just for a heartbeat, long enough for Harrison's dart to hit her haunch, tranquilizer flooding her system. She took 2 steps toward Samuel, stumbled, went down hard. The other hyenas saw their leader fall. The fight went out of them. They melted back into darkness, leaving their matriarch unconscious in the mud. "Done," Potgieter announced, pulling off bloody gloves. "She'll live." The male lion crawled back to the lioness's side. Blood seeped from a dozen wounds, but he rumbled deep in his chest. Not a growl or roar, a sound of comfort, of presence. The lioness's tongue found his muzzle. Just a touch. "Oshto, the cub, needs antibiotics every 4 hours," Eleanor said. "For his lungs." Samuel looked at the tiny, paralyzed creature. "Then what he can't return to the wild." "No," Potgieter agreed. "But there's a sanctuary, near Kruger. They take disabled animals, give them quality of life." 3 weeks later, Samuel stood at his fence line. The lioness walked beside him, favoring her healing wounds but moving steadily. The male flanked her other side. They'd claimed his water trough area as temporary territory. The cub rode in a special sling Eleanor had designed. Strapped to Samuel's chest, his back legs still useless but his spirit fierce. He'd learned to pull himself around with front legs strong as steel. Tomorrow, the transport would take him to the sanctuary. The lioness knew. Somehow, she understood her cub was leaving. She groomed him constantly, as if trying to give him enough mother love to last a lifetime. Tom had brought news from the hospital. Marcus would recover fully. The footage he'd shot had gone global, 20 million views in a week. Donations poured in for wildlife protection. Even Carson had contributed, his grandson insisting. "Time," Eleanor said softly. Samuel lifted the cub from his sling, the tiny lion mewed in protest, wanting the warmth. The lioness took him gently in her jaws, carried him to a sunny spot. She lay down, curled around him. The male joined them. For an hour, they were simply a family, no different from any pride across Africa. Dr. Potgieter's truck rumbled up the road. Time for the sanctuary. The lioness carried her cub to the vehicle, set him in the travel crate herself, touched his head once with her massive paw. Then, she walked away. Didn't look back. The male followed her. Samuel understood. In the wild. Mothers abandoned cubs who couldn't keep up, but this wasn't abandonment. This was trust. She was giving her cub to humans who could provide what she couldn't, a chance at life. 6 months later, Samuel received a video. The cub, they'd named him with the Hebrew word tikva, meaning hope, had learned to swim. Water therapy had strengthened his front legs beyond normal lion development. He pulled himself through the sanctuary pond with joy, splashing his caregivers. A year later, another video. Tikva had bonded with an orphaned leopard cub. They played together, the leopard learning to move slowly so Tikva could keep up. 2 years later, Samuel made the journey to visit. Tikva recognized his scent immediately. The paralyzed lion, now fully grown from the waist forward, dragged himself over and rubbed his massive head against Samuel's leg. The sanctuary director watched in amazement. He's never done that with anyone. Samuel sat in the dust, the way he had that first day with Tikva's mother. The lion settled beside him, purring like thunder. His mother, the director asked, alive, had 2 healthy cubs this season, she in the male control territory near my cabin, and you. Samuel's arthritis had worsened. His son Ben had moved to South Africa, bringing the grandchildren. They helped with the cabin, learned the ways of the bush. The youngest, 8-year-old Sarah, had her grandmother Helen's eyes and her grandfather's way with animals. The reserve created a position, Samuel said. Wildlife liaison. Basically. I sit on my porch and document behavior. The lioness brings her cubs to visit. Not close, just enough so I can see them. Like she's showing them to family. Tikva yawned, displaying teeth that could crush bone. Then he licked Samuel's arthritic hand with infinite gentleness. You saved them all? The director said. No, Samuel corrected. We saved each other. 3,000 miles away, on the African plains, a lioness taught her cubs to hunt. But first, she led them to a ridge overlooking a small cabin. They sat in the fading light, watching an old man on a porch, a young girl beside him. The lioness made a sound in her throat. The cubs looked where she looked. Remember this place. Her posture said, remember this man. The old ranger raised his hand in greeting. The lioness blinked slowly, that universal cat sign of trust, then led her cubs back into the grass. Some connections transcend explanation. They simply are. And sometimes, that's enough. Connecting hearts. I need to tell you something. When I first heard Samuel's story, I didn't believe it. A wild lioness trusting a human. Impossible. But then I saw the videos, spoke to Marcus, visited Tikva myself. What I learned changed me. We spend our lives building walls between ourselves and the wild, convinced that separation means safety. But Samuel and that lioness proved something different. They showed that recognition can happen across any divide, not taming, not domestication, but simple acknowledgement of shared mortality, shared love for our young, shared need for help sometimes. That's what I needed you to know. Author's note. This story was inspired by documented human-wildlife interactions, but is created solely for entertainment purposes. While based on real behavioral possibilities, this work does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of dangerous interaction with wild animals. All characters and specific events are products of creative imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. Wild animals should always be treated with respect and caution. If you encounter wildlife in distress, contact proper authorities. Never attempt to approach or assist dangerous animals without professional training and support.